Picture this: a rainy evening, the soft tap of raindrops against the window, the faint hum of a clock ticking in the corner of the room, and me, sitting alone in my office. The case had been lingering for a week now, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. I'd received a letter from Lady Viola Harrington, a woman of impeccable stature, well known in society. A robbery, she claimed. But something about her words, the way they were written, raised a question in my mind. Was this robbery truly what it seemed? I hadn't stepped foot in the Harrington estate yet, but from the moment I read her letter, I could sense that the answer wouldn't be as simple as stolen goods. This wasn't just any object. It was a ring. The ring, to be exact. A priceless family heirloom passed down through generations, worn by women of the Harrington family since the 1700s. Of course, the value was astronomical, but the true worth lay in its legacy, its history. That's what made it more than just an object. It was part of the family's identity. I couldn't imagine what would drive someone to steal it. The question wasn't just who took it, but why. And that's when I arrived at the estate. The mansion was imposing, the kind of place where every room could hold a secret. The halls were wide, lined with portraits of the Harringtons from long ago. But this wasn't a place for nostalgia. This was a place where tension hung in the air, where every footstep felt like it echoed through the past. Lady Viola greeted me in the drawing room, her face poised, her movements deliberate. She was as graceful as her reputation suggested, but I could see it in her eyes. Nervousness, something she was trying to conceal beneath her polished exterior. I had seen it before, the way people behaved when they were hiding something, or worse, when they were unsure if their lies would hold. She poured the tea, her hands steady, but the moment she spoke, I could hear the tremor in her voice. She told me about the robbery, how the ring had been stolen from its display case the night before. But something in her tone told me she wasn't giving me the whole story. It was too rehearsed, too clean. That's when I knew this wasn't an ordinary case. The family had gathered for dinner, Detective. She told me, almost too calmly. Afterward, the ring was gone, vanished. I cannot understand it. Only those closest to the family have access to the display room. I fear the thief is someone in this house. Someone in the house? I nodded, but I could feel a different question forming in my mind. Why did she sound so sure of that? The truth is, I'd heard these stories before. A crime committed within the family, a person who insists they don't know who did it. But something told me this was different. Lady Viola wasn't telling the whole truth, and I knew I had to dig deeper to find the answer. I walked through the house, past the grand chandelier in the hallway, through the silent rooms where the only sounds were the faint creak of floorboards beneath my shoes. When I reached the display case, I took my time inspecting it. The ring was gone, but there was no sign of a struggle. No broken glass, no fingerprints, nothing to indicate that anyone had forced their way inside. It was too neat, almost like someone had simply opened the case and taken it, as if they had been expected. I couldn't help but wonder, who would know the exact combination to open that case? Lady Viola had mentioned only a few people had access to that room, the staff and, of course, family members. But as I examined the dust around the edges of the display, I noticed something strange. A faint disturbance in the dust, barely noticeable, but it was there. It was almost as though someone had opened the case recently. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't an outsider who had taken the ring. It was someone who was trusted, someone who knew the family well. The staff seemed cooperative enough when I spoke to them. The butler, an older man with a stoic face, gave me all the right answers. He'd been in the kitchen during the theft, he said, preparing dinner. The maid, a young woman named Margaret, had been outside, tending to the garden. The gardener himself, a man named Charles, had been dismissed only a few weeks prior, but he claimed he'd been visiting a nearby estate, an alibi I would need to verify. But despite their alibis, despite their calm, something felt off about all of them. There was a tension beneath their words, a hesitation in their eyes. Every detail, no matter how small, felt like a potential clue, like pieces of a puzzle I had yet to solve. I had my suspicions about Charles, the gardener. He had been dismissed, and according to the staff, he'd been seen lingering around the back door the night of the theft. But it wasn't just his behavior that caught my attention. No, it was the fact that Lady Viola had mentioned him in passing, just once, but in a way that suggested concern. "Charles," she had said, almost like an afterthought. "He's back in town after all these years. I'm not sure how I feel about that." The more I thought about it, the more I realized Lady Viola had never truly explained why Charles had returned, or why she seemed so wary of him. So I paid him a visit. When I found him, he was just as I expected, charming, a bit too smooth for comfort. But something didn't add up. His story didn't quite match the timeline, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. I left the meeting with more questions than answers, but there was something that kept nagging at me. The letters. A small detail, almost forgotten in the chaos, but it kept resurfacing. The night I returned to the mansion, I searched the library again, not for the ring, but for something more. And then, tucked behind a row of books, I found them. A collection of letters. Not just any letters. These were personal, and they were addressed to Lady Viola. I read them carefully. Business deals, promises made, debts settled. But there was something more hidden between the lines, something that didn't belong. And then it hit me. Viola had known all along. She had orchestrated the entire thing. Not the theft, not the robbery, but the plan. She had arranged for the ring to be taken, and she had used Charles as the perfect pawn in her game. The twist was simple, really. Viola had intended to use the theft to her advantage, to gain control over her cousin's assets, to force him into making a deal that would secure her future. The robbery wasn't about the ring at all. It was a distraction, a means to an end. I confronted her with the letters, and at first, she denied everything. But as I laid out the evidence piece by piece, she cracked. In the end, it wasn't Charles who had taken the ring. It was Viola. She had played the role of the victim, setting up her own cousin as the fall guy. Another case solved. But as I walked out of the mansion, I couldn't shake the feeling that the true mystery wasn't the theft at all. It was the power of secrets, how easily they could be hidden in plain sight, buried under layers of truth. And just like that, the case was closed. But the puzzle never quite leaves you, does it?